In this chapter and in the next chapter, we're talking about sports and gambling, and um, it's a bit of a. I enjoy sports. I enjoy watching sports. I don't as an economist, it's a little bit harder for me to come to grips with sports because it's not. Economists view sports in a very different fashion. So, in some sense, um, this is a chapter not about sports itself, like in a Moneyball fashion, but rather um, the biggest thing, which is sports teams and what places spend to get teams. So let me start out with some history first. That's just kind of the knowledge I have. So I grew up in Wisconsin, um, and I grew up in the largest city in Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Now, Milwaukee had a sports team, a baseball team that were the Milwaukee Braves. Now, the Milwaukee Braves ended up going to Atlanta to become the Atlanta Braves, but there was a period of time in the late 60s and early 70s where Milwaukee didn't have a baseball team. Now, given the size of Milwaukee at the time, it was one of the largest, among the largest cities in the United States. And so the idea that it didn't have a professional baseball team seemed pretty, I guess, disturbing for them. So Milwaukee wanted a baseball team. How do you get a baseball team? Which, if the Major League Baseball, which is kind of right the league, if the league doesn't create a team for you, you've got to convince uh, another city's team to come to you, which is what Milwaukee did. Milwaukee got the Seattle Sonics. I think that's what they were called. It got the Seattle Sonics to move from Seattle to Milwaukee. Why or how did they convince that team to do it? They built it a stadium. And so the stadium was called Milwaukee County Stadium. Pretty original name because the county was Milwaukee. It was called Milwaukee County Stadium, and it was basically financed by the public. Now, today we don't think that that's odd, but that represented one of the first stadiums ever built out of public funds to get a sports team to come. Now, you should already be thinking, why should a um, public government, a public entity, which has all these competing things that it has to spend money on, like um, libraries, schools, medical care, um, highways, right? The list goes on and on. Why should it also be building a stadium? The argument for the economist is that if you build it, that's come first part of this year, that if the stadium is built, the sports team comes, and then people go to the sports game, and then they spend money while they're there, thus justifying the initial investment in the stadium. You can't have a team without a stadium. Once you've got the team, then the people go to the game and spend the money. Okay. Let's go now to our local. And again, I know we have the slides here, but I just kind of want to now talk about Aloha Stadium. So Aloha Stadium comes about at around the same time. It's built around the same time actually as Milwaukee County Stadium. And again, I'm not from Hawaii, so this is all a little bit newer to me than this. But it opens in the mid '70s. I'm just reading from the Wikipedia entry here. I'm not an expert on Aloha Stadium. But what's not covered in this article is that at the time, the goal of building Aloha Stadium is that it was going to be built with public funds, and that by doing that, we were going to get. I think the idea was that we were either going to get a baseball team, a Major League Baseball team, or a football team. I think we were going to get one or the other. Does it say here? doesn't. Um, but okay, so but the original idea was that we were going to get a professional team. Like I think it was the priority was baseball. I think at the time. Um, And then once once the Warriors and the Wahine entered NCAA Division One, then they needed a stadium to play their games at. So then they used Aloha Stadium for the Division One, the NCAA Division One Warriors and Wahine. Well, in this case, the Warriors for Warriors football. And then they could also use that same stadium, kind of in a multi-purpose fashion. They could also use it for other events like concerts, soccer, baseball, football, Pro Bowl games, things like that. Okay, so you got a lot of shit going on here. Plus, it's being used, especially in the time of the mid '70s, in an area of Oahu, which kind of was like the sorry if you live there, kind of like the garbage dump of Oahu, right? Where like, and by that, a garbage dump of Oahu, where I mean it's kind of like the dumping ground, right? It's like shipping containers being transported, warehouses, right? It's kind of like the area, at least of Oahu, which keeps Honolulu running. But it's a dirty business to be warehousing and storing stuff and manufacturing stuff. A lot of that's done in Halava, and it's got to be done somewhere, and that's where it was being done. So they built the stadium there as well. Now, I did do a little bit of searching here, and it actually speaks to the slides that we're going to talk about too. But this is on Civil B, but it does speak to the theme we're trying to get to here, right? Former governors speak truth to the silly idea: if you build it, they will come, which um, is difficult to pull off, right? So you've got some pretty old school governors here of Hawaii talking about how we now need to replace Aloha Stadium, which now can't be used anymore. It's rusting. It's a piece of shit. Although I will say this, as I'm looking at the things that have been done there, dude, U2 with Pearl Jam as an opening act. Pearl Jam is your opening act for U2 with Billy Armstrong from Green Day. Dude, that must have been a fantastic concert. Um, I was in grad school, so I don't know what to say. That's a really great concert. Um, yeah, Bruno Mars. I guess that was here when I was here. I mean, Jack Johnson. That's not bad. Wait, did that actually happen? Doesn't look like. Did it happen? Maybe it didn't happen. What about Guns N' Roses? Did they come here? Let's see. Now I'm really curious. Did they actually come to Honolulu, or did it get canceled? It doesn't look like they came to Honolulu. Sorry, or maybe they did. Let's see. I'm really curious now. Sorry, I'm wasting all our time here by continuing to look at this, but I still am. And I'm still looking. Wait, why am I doing all this hardcore stuff here? It should be. Jeez. But they did. On their way back from Johannesburg, they stopped in Honolulu, I guess, as a stopover to end that journey. Interesting. Guess it was on their way home. Anyway, the idea again is when it was originally built, it was we're going to build the stadium, we're going to get the stuff to come here after we have the stadium, and that's what they're saying now as well, that if we build this stadium we will get something. And so the goal now is, since Aloha Stadium, I mean, they're talking here about demolishing it because again it's really old and it's falling apart, that if they demolish this and they build something new, people will come. it would cost a lot of money to fix it, obviously. So it's kind of like you have to, um, if if it's not working anymore, you would almost have to either replace it or just destroy it. And well, you could build housing there. There's a lot of other things we could use with the space, but the idea seems to be the idea now is what they want to do is they want to take the whole kind of space, and they want to um, build a smaller stadium, and they'll build like what they call an entertainment district. You kind of need it to be an entertainment district because you're going to have to you want to do two things here. One, you want people to spend the money to justify the public investment in a new stadium, but also Hawaii doesn't have the money to build a new stadium. So the only way Hawaii state government in general is able to build things without the money is if they get a private developer involved. What's called a P3 project, which is what they're doing here on this West Oahu campus. It's called a 3P or P3 project because it's a public private partnership, 3Ps. And what you're doing is you're saying, what, for instance, UH wants to do with the land here on this campus is they want to say, okay, we own, I think it's like we have 240 acres, a really big plot of land. And obviously the campus is built on, I don't know what this is, 40 acres, I don't know, a small chunk of the total space. And the idea is they will lease it to private businesses to build whatever they want, right? Hotels, apartments, restaurants, and other things. And then UH will use that money they get from the leasing to develop other things. It's not working. I mean, and for anyone who's been on this campus, you would know nothing seems to be happening on this campus in terms of things other than the campus itself. And so it kind of would make us question whether something would actually happen at the stadium, and would it justify that kind of investment. Okay, let's go back finally to the slides here. Sorry, them taking so long here. Okay, so that gives us kind of the predicament that cities face. In Hawaii, we've tended to do the thing of build a lure to get a team from another city. Right, we're going to build the stadium, and then we'll get one from a city that has neglected their team. So St. Louis used to have a football team. They didn't really care about it that much. That football team went to LA. And we can think of other examples as well. The other idea would be is that you get it when the league, like Major League Baseball or the National Basketball Association, or the National Football League, when they expand teams, you hope to get something. It's just difficult. As any student athlete would know, it's just difficult to be traveling that much, to do all your sports games, right? To do all your events. And to have teams come here to compete is also going to be very difficult as well, especially when you're talking about baseball, right? Where you've got so many games. It's a little bit less difficult for football, where you're obviously not playing as many games. The reason, if we were just talking about private business building a stadium, I'm not even sure we'd really even need to talk about this that much. The problem is that we're not. We're talking about the public making an investment in a stadium. And again, if you read the art, I've never done a Google search on this, but let's just do one on this. So right now we have the swap meet. Oh, someone did a question here. Yeah, I thought I was going to find. Let's try this. Well, I mean, this is a little bit of a dated article here, but let's just look at this here. Again, I've not read any of this. I've not pre-read any of this. Wow, they're going to say they're going to start next year. Let's just watch this. Again, I haven't watched this, but let's just play with this and see what's going on.
I'm here for moral support. You're doing great, Tammy.
Earn cashback that automatically adjusts to where your spending is trending with the City Custom Cash Card.
And redevelopment of the aging Aloha Stadium will provide a huge boost to Hawaii's economy.
Liar. She's lying. She's lying. It's not going to provide a huge boost. She's lying. But she probably doesn't know. So it's not like she's lying intentionally. She's just reading a cue card.
The project will also create about 3,000 affordable housing units.
Probably not true as well.
Rick Daysog has more.
Again, don't blame her. Don't blame Rick. They just don't know.
Construction to build a new Aloha Stadium will likely begin in early 2023.
Probably not.
Once the project gets underway, the redevelopment is expected to add thousands of jobs to Hawaii's economy.
Probably
We're
not.
looking at over 12,660 construction jobs and more than $595 million in construction wages alone. I mean, that's even before we start operating.
Okay, so here's the problem, right? She just gave you all these huge numbers, and you're like, fuck, that's a whole bunch of development. Yeah, let's totally build that stadium. But, and keep this in mind, it's not like the construction worker would have been out of work, right? We've got a whole bunch of other stuff that we're all trying to build here at the same time. So it's not like someone was sitting at home doing nothing, and then all of a sudden they say, let's build Aloha Stadium. Hey, you know how to weld. Let's start, you can now be working. That would be a true economic impact, right? If we had idle workers who didn't have work to do. But we actually have a labor shortage in most parts, right? We're still building rail out, so that's obviously causing a huge shortage in labor, skilled labor. This only kind of adds to that. So we're not really adding new jobs. They would be doing other things otherwise. And the reason why I said the affordable housing, you can't build a stadium and finance it by building affordable housing. I know I'm a pessimist when I say it, but do you honestly think that they care about affordable housing when you're building a stadium? You could use all the money you're using to build the stadium to build affordable housing if that was your priority. It's not their priority. It makes it look nicer. And I know I sound pessimistic, and maybe you're saying, and you're sitting and watching this and thinking, Shiting, you're really wrong. You're really dark. I just don't see it happening. Okay, let's watch the rest of this lie.
The members of the new Aloha Stadium Entertainment Districts team say their mixed development plan will create more economic activity than simply building homes at the 98-acre site. Their proposal includes housing.
Oh, wait, I don't want to see that. What did they say?
Tenants, simply building homes at the 98-acre site. Their proposal districts team said their mixed development plan will create more economic activity than simply building homes at the 98-acre site.
Well, that is absolutely true, because people would be living there and they wouldn't be getting like slosh drunk and like spending a lot of money. So absolutely true. There would not be as much economic activity, but at the same time, people need to live. So I'm not, I don't really have anything nice to say, so I'm not going to say anything.
Their proposal includes housing, but it also adds commercial tenants, generating nearly $1.5 billion in economic output.
The economic gains for developing the entire district are tremendous and long-lasting, which unfortunately you would not get if you built 20,000 to 100,000 affordable housing units.
Think about that. If you had 20,000 to 100,000 housing units, think of, this is just me talking, and I'm not a politician. I'm just a lowly state employee. But think of the impact that creating 40 to 100,000 housing units would have on our society, on our community. Um, it would certainly um, it would just change the way, in a positive fashion, the way a lot of people live, to have an affordable housing unit rather than have a stadium. That's my personal view. You can think whatever you want.
Still, some oppose the plan. Last month,
Exciting.
former governors Neil Abercrombie, Ben Cayetano, and John Waihee published an editorial in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser arguing against rebuilding the stadium, replacing it with housing instead. Meanwhile, stadium officials say their plan will also expand professional sports and entertainment activity at the stadium.
We have had interest both from Major League Rugby as well as very serious interest from the United Soccer League. They provided a letter of intent to have two teams here and to actually activate the site 40 to 50 times a year.
Before that happens, the state will need to pick a developer for the project. They're now down to 3 teams. Rick Daysog, Hawaii News Now.
Okay, so I guess that's. Okay, so let's go back to this. Sorry if I sound so pessimistic. So there you go, right? The problem for Hawaii is that you're not getting a lot of people that are going to travel here that don't already live here. So really what you're trying to do is get people to spend more money that already live here than they normally would, right? So on a typical night, evening home, dude, I go home and I go to sleep not spending any money. So the idea here would be if there was a new Aloha Stadium, Shedding would go out and get blasted drunk watching a soccer game. I mean, it could happen. I mean, it's not saying it's impossible. My wife would not tolerate it, so it ain't gonna happen. But not everyone's married, right? So maybe you would get the people to um, spend more money. Now, is that a good thing socially? I'm not sure, but that's the plan. Okay, so that's so the difficult thing is that if you get a team here, you don't even know if they will stay here, even if you build them a new stadium, because this would be a small market. We have a pretty odd and pretty small local TV market. If you think about it, we have KHON, which is the Fox station, and then all the others are actually jointly running their news department. It's actually all owned by one place, and all of those companies are on the mainland. They don't generate enough ad revenue because we don't get the same ads that they get on the mainland. So and TV itself is changing, right? I mean, people are doing like Hulu TV online, right? YouTube TV online. So even just the classic way we used to do things, in terms of financing things through television exclusive rights, is changing. Yeah, you would still have things like luxury boxes and whatnot like that, but you can't build a stadium and finance it with just luxury boxes, as nice as they are. I'm not gonna do a Moneyball story here. Most teams though do not make money. It's Most teams do not make money while you own them. Owning a sports team, kind of like Mark Cuban does, right? I mean, it makes you look. I mean, it's a toy for someone rich to have, kind of like having a private jet or something like that. It's nice to have something like that, but you're not making money typically on the team. Where you make the money is that the league only has so many teams. And so you then have a monopoly on that space, and you are able to then, when you sell it, you're going to have all these people that want to buy your thing, which which really gives us then our second bullet point, which is then to say that you make the money on the sale of the team. And it's an exotic investment that does give you a rate of return that can exceed other things. And what we see too is that even the labor market within sports is different because there's only so many teams that are out there. Um, what this does is it means that the players, when they're going around, only have so many teams that are able to hire them at least at the professional level, and so you kind of have to right and that team has to have an opening, right? So if you're a quarterback and they've already got a quarterback and a reserve quarterback, how much are they going to pay for a second, reserve quarterback? Probably not that much, and so that's going to limit as well what a player can get. What becomes important for the players is the fact that they are also in a union. Right, so professional sports, all the professional sports teams, all the players are in a union, and that union ensures that things like healthcare are covered. It ensures that they have a really good pension that allows them to retire early, right? Because playing is pretty rough on the body, and it ensures that players get a certain minimum pay amount. And so you need that because in that negotiation process, you then, if you had a monopsony, which is the union, only that right. So if you as a individual, you always are going to be a part of the players' union. You're going to then be negotiating your wage with a team, which is the only buyer of your services in that city. Now, um, in that negotiation process, the player knows where they kind of stand up and they know what wage they want to receive. So they set what's defined as a reservation wage. What's the lowest amount they'd be willing to accept to do their job? And this isn't just unique to players, right? We all do this, right? I would not work for minimum wage. Um, Not that I think the job is beneath me. I think it's an honorable way to live a life, but um, it's just I'd have to spend more time away from my kids, so I wouldn't, unless I need the job to survive, which then I'll do it fine. But I'm not as desperate for extra spending money that I'm willing to do away with spending time with my kids for just minimum wage. Um, First, of my reservation wage is something higher than minimum wage. Now, in that negotiation process, right, the union is then setting the minimum wage, at least that applies for those in the union. Now, when we look at, for instance, Major League Baseball just ended they were having actually negotiations over their contract that were taking a little bit longer, which delayed opening day. So, you know, then we get into things like free agent. So when we say that a player is a free agent, then all the teams can compete for that person. So it does right. So then you have the bidding that can get that player a higher salary. But when a player starts out, typically they join the draft. And what the draft does is that you get all the top players that are just coming out of college, or maybe they didn't even finish college and are going up for the draft early. And the teams get an order based on their previous record. And so like the teams that are losing, or I think the last place team gets to pick first. Um, and then they can pick the player. They don't have to negotiate the salary. The salary amount is determined by the order of the draft. So there's a first round of the draft, second round, third round, and whatnot. Um, Hawaii's golden child, Marcus Mariota, just signed a 2-year contract. And I was just trying to look for what the amounts were. He had a 2-year contract with Atlanta, I think. I'm not mistaken. Um, I'm not gonna watch a video from Bree. Um, I thought there was just pictures, really. So for you got a 2-year deal for $19 million, and um, he's getting these kind of short-term deals, which he can leave after 1 year, or the team I think may even be able to leave after 1 year. Um, but he used to be with the LA Raiders. Um, you know, it. He's started obviously with the Tennessee Titans, and what basically he's doing here is he's kind of living a life as a professional based on um, you know multiple short year contracts. And as the article points out here, it depends how the draft unfolds as well. So if a team can't afford to get someone um, better for a certain position, then they might have to take up on Marcus, right? Because each team faces a salary cap. What that means is that they're limited on how much they can spend on all of their players. And so at some point, right, if they can't get the best, they have to at least get what they can afford. And that kind of can control how they're overall doing. Okay, so we've all got league minimum salaries here for our 4 major sports leagues. Um, Baseball doesn't have the salary cap, so you do get the really high paid players. But it gives you a sense of how the labor market looks a little different for the major leagues. I know nothing about international, so let's not. I'm not. I just don't want to get into it. I really honestly don't know much about soccer. And it's not saying I don't like soccer, but I just don't know much about it. The only other thing we can say here about sports is that it it is changing. Not only because you are getting things like NASCAR and things like that are kind of trying to expand the scope of what's counted as professional sports teams, but it's also changing because of gambling and the increased legality of gambling, which is actually the point of our next chapter. So I hope this kind of gives you at least a very broad overview of sports, at least in how economists try to understand it, and how it's also affecting our local communities, which it obviously is.